A diplomatic jihad at the United Nations, the likes of which the West and the Arab East have never seen. But why is the Arab Middle East far less excited than the West about recognizing another Palestinian state, this time in the hills above Ben Gurion Airport? Stay with us. We'll figure it out here on Al-Sharq Al-Awsat Lana, Our Middle East. Khaled Toameh, my dear friend of so many decades and a very, very strong colleague and one of the leading experts on Palestinian affairs, Arab affairs here in the Middle East and Israel. What a situation we face at the United Nations. Israel very much isolated on the international stage, fewer than 2 years following the worst Islamic Jihad, it has to be said, that in one day that any Western country has experienced. It's a whole reversal of fortunes that is more than ironic. It's almost fantastic, and in the sense that you couldn't actually have made this up.
You know, Dan, I'm actually surprised that people are surprised by what is happening. We have been witnessing a massive diplomatic offensive against Israel spearheaded by the Palestinian Authority over the past 10 or 15 years. This is a campaign that is being waged in the international community, not only to gain recognition of a Palestinian state, but to delegitimize Israel and to isolate it in the international community. And we see it escalating. What happened in the past few days or in the last week or two with the recognition of the Palestinian state by Canada, by the UK, by Australia, is the culmination of the Palestinian Authority efforts. There has always been a divide in the operations between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. Hamas fights Israel on the ground. The Palestinian Authority fights Israel in the international community. The Palestinian Authority wages and has been waging a diplomatic and legal campaign against Israel. This is a big success for the Palestinian Authority, by the way. Not to mention for Hamas also. Hamas is celebrating. Hamas is also calling it a victory. Hamas is saying this is a victory for October 7. This is we are now picking the fruits of October 7. And the Palestinian Authority is also trying to take credit by arguing that this is the fruit of our efforts in the international community over the past, or in the international arena over the past 10 or 15 years. This is how we should look at it. There's always been agreement between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. You guys can want to pursue the resistance. We have no problem with it. We believe that the resistance we want to carry out should be different. It's a diplomatic and legal resistance against Israel. So this is what Israel is facing.
Absolutely, Khaled. And, it really needs to be said on two accounts. When the Hamas congratulates the Western powers for their ill-advised decision to support another, what would be a Palestinian terror state in the hills above Ben Gurion Airport, the Western powers should be frightened by that, but they don't seem to register that they've become helpers to jihad, as opposed to bringing the sides closer to some sort of secure, stable, and peaceful resolution. Number one. Number two, we do have to say that Arafat in his grave would not be rolling in his grave, but will be laughing from his grave, because he began this entire tsunami, this diplomatic, what was called in revolutionary language, resistance or jihad. He started it back in the late 1960s when he became chairman of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, back in February 1969. Remember what happened after the 1967 war with the disastrous failure of the Arab states, of 4 Arab states, to destroy Israel, and Israel conquered in 6 days land from also in the Sinai from Egypt, in the Golan Heights from Syria, and got the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. So Arafat began in the early 1970s to bring this entire war that you just talked about, the political war, to the UN. And in fact, there were a number of resolutions that what they called the question of Palestine, which is exactly the language they're using today in 2025, with 153 countries of the 192 members of the United Nations General Assembly recognizing a non-existent Palestine, a Palestine that does not that does not satisfy any of the requirements for statehood. It doesn't control a definite, firm, permanent population. It doesn't control a determined geographic area, and it is not able to engage in international relations. Also, according to the Oslo Accord. So no one seems to care about international law while quoting international law and accusing Israel of violating international law. All of this propaganda, not based on anything, but at the end of the day, Israel finds itself really in a corner.
If you look at the responses in the Arab world, and even among the Palestinians, you don't see much excitement at these recognitions. Why? Because the Palestinians are much more realistic than the world leaders who are dreamers. The Palestinians know that nothing is going to change on the ground. They know that they're not going to wake up tomorrow and see that, a Palestinian government is sitting in Jerusalem, the capital of Palestine. And they know that. They are much more realistic. They look at the reality on the ground and they understand that nothing is going to change. But here's how many Palestinians perceive it. This is a victory because it isolates Israel. It's a diplomatic stab for Israel. It's a kind of a retribution, the way they see it. If something insults Israel and makes Israel angry, then it's good for the Palestinians. So that's how it's perceived among many Palestinians, that it's more that these Western leaders are actually doing it not out of love for the Palestinians, but because they have a problem with Israel. And the Palestinians will always welcome any attack on Israel, whether it's a rocket attack by Saddam Hussein or by Hezbollah or by Hamas, or whether it's a diplomatic warfare or a campaign against Israel in the international arena. So this is how it's perceived among the Palestinians. For Hamas, this is actually, as I mentioned earlier, a victory because Hamas is now boasting. Hamas is sending a message to the Palestinian public. You see, you said that the October 7 did not achieve anything. No, it did achieve. Were it not for October 7, these world leaders would not be recognizing the Palestinian state. So that is the message that Hamas is sending. Then it reminds me, immediately after the Israeli disengagement from Gaza in 2005, Hamas took credit for driving Israel out of Gaza.
They did.
And Hamas was then telling the Palestinians, you see, we drove Israel out of Gaza through rockets and suicide bombings. Hamas won the Palestinian parliamentary elections 4 months later because they took credit for driving Israel out of the Gaza Strip through violence, resistance, terrorism. The same thing is happening now. The move to recognize a Palestinian state by world leaders will embolden Hamas, and it will help Hamas restore its popularity among the Palestinians. Ironically, Dan, this move comes at a time when a growing number of Palestinians were expressing discontent with Hamas, were beginning to express disillusionment with Hamas. And here comes the international community, these world leaders, through the UN. They stand there, they declare, we support a Palestinian state, or we recognize a Palestinian state. And then people say, maybe Hamas is right after all. Maybe it was worth it was worthwhile to carry out October 7. So this plays into the hands of Hamas, and it emboldens Hamas and makes Hamas even more popular among the Palestinians.
Absolutely, and it has international implications too. You remind me, Khaled, about following the American retreat from Afghanistan, where you saw, all these Afghanis running down the runway with the American C-130 transport plane taking off, in desperation, and leaving behind all of this, military vehicles and hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment. And then the phone call came from Hamas to the Taliban saying, Inshallah, Bezrat Hashem, God willing, we not Bezrat Hashem, but Inshallah, we will drive out the Zionists from Palestine in the way that the Taliban, drove out the Americans from Kabul and from Afghanistan.
I remember that, and I even reported on the Hamas congratulations to the Taliban back then for driving the Americans out of Afghanistan. And Hamas, as you pointed out correctly, said soon this will happen also to the Zionists in Palestine. So it's all about what message you send. And we are in a situation where the international community has actually emboldened the radicals among the Palestinians. It has actually boosted those who want jihad against Israel, those who are waging jihad. And this is going to have very serious repercussions on and negative ones, by the way, on the Palestinians themselves, because they will soon realize that the European and the international move is not really directed or does not really aim to help them, but it's more about, it's more directed against Israel. At the end of the day, the Palestinians will not see real changes on the ground, and this could spill over into violence because the higher the expectations, the higher the possibility that there will be violence on the ground, the higher the disappointment.
And clearly, people in the former West Bank of Jordan, which all of Israel recognizes as Judea and Samaria, will gain a certain amount of glee and, as you say, expectation. When they see what happened in Gaza, they will do a copy-paste to the West Bank, which is why we can very well see and are already seeing, according to the reports in the last few days alone, that violence is in an upsurge in West Bank Palestinian-controlled cities because of this sense that they see the West with them. They see that terrorism pays. That see that violence is worthwhile. They feel completely emboldened. And let's face it, the Islamic Republic of Iran has, between Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other agents and cells working in a number of the 7 Palestinian Authority controlled cities, according to Oslo. They have a lot of operatives there, and there's chaos that the Palestinian Authority security forces are not able to contain. And here they have the full support of many Western countries, especially France and the UK, which are 2 members of the UN Security Council. And that's a bad message.
I'm receiving reports from Palestinians in Jenin and Nablus and even in Ramallah, and in addition to Tulkarem, that the Iran-backed battalions are resurfacing. They are beginning to operate once again. This morning, Israel killed 2 members of the battalions in Tubas. They are from Tamun near Jenin. In the last few days, we even heard about the emergence of the battalion in Ramallah. Ramallah, the capital of the Palestinians, where Mahmoud Abbas is sitting. We didn't have the Iranian-backed battalion, which is actually a militia. We didn't have one in Ramallah, but now we see that we have it in Ramallah. Just 2 days ago, Israel announced that they found a rocket in Tulkarem. So you see that the terror infrastructure in the West Bank, the one that is backed by Iran, is raising its head once again, and this is very dangerous. The Palestinian Authority, as you mentioned, is not really cracking down on these terrorist groups for 2 reasons. One, they're afraid of them. Number 2, they don't have the will to do it. And this is very dangerous. The situation is, as many Palestinians say, on the verge of an explosion.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is beyond the fact that the Israeli political establishment, the government, is under a lot of pressure to take retaliatory moves against such an ill-advised move by the international community. And that can range from punishing the Palestinian Authority, dissolving the Palestinian Authority. It can, which on some level I would argue, is a good idea, because it is exactly what much of the Palestinian public demands would be the retiring of Mahmoud Abbas and the disbanding of the Palestinian Authority, which the vast majority, I mean, in the 80 and more percent, who have demanded that Mahmoud Abbas go home, and a similar, if I'm not mistaken, a similar percentage, according to Professor Shkaki's own polls, demand that the Palestinian Authority, viewed as completely corrupt and completely, lacking in any regard for human rights, civil rights of the Palestinians themselves, that they go home, and that that offers, I think it provides the possibility of going back to what I call the Hebron first local control model, which is based on, clans, tribes, and families in each of the major cities, which in my assessment, it's how the Middle East organizes itself. In the Gulf, the Emirates organize themselves that way. I wouldn't call it the Emirates plan, because that sort of superimposes it's an incorrect metaphor for or analogy for the Palestinian areas, because the Palestinian Arabs are from different families than the Emirates are in the Gulf. However, the concept of the village leagues, which was a local control model of very strong cooperation between Israel, the Israeli security forces, and the locals and the local families across the West Bank, and they had guns, and they had the capability of defending themselves. And today, with Israel being such a high-tech power and economic force in the Middle East, if I were a Palestinian notable or one of the major families, I wouldn't want any other neighbor than the state of Israel that would be empowering me economically, politically, socially, and in terms of security.
The problem then, right now, is that we don't see a clear Israeli policy. We don't know what does the Israeli government want to do with the Palestinian Authority or with the Palestinians. And that's why it's very important for the Israeli government to come out with a plan. You want to fight the Palestinian Authority, that's fine, but you have to decide, is the Palestinian Authority an ally or a foe, an enemy?
You've been saying this for years, by the way.
And Israel keeps sending contradictory messages to the Palestinians and to the rest of the world. And that's why people are confused about the role of the Palestinian Authority. And if Israel wants to go against the Palestinian Authority, are you also going to go against the Palestinians? You need to make a distinction between the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people. You correctly pointed out that if you ask, that public opinion polls have shown over the past few years that a majority of Palestinians have no faith in the Palestinian Authority. They've lost confidence in the Palestinian Authority. Over 80% of the Palestinians want Mahmoud Abbas to resign. Over 88% of the Palestinians see the Palestinian Authority as very corrupt, very incompetent. So this is a time for Israel to make a decision, to spell out this, to devise a strategy as to how you are going to deal with this situation. But if you leave a vacuum, that's not very good. And the feeling is that there is a vacuum. No one is filling it. There's a feeling that Israel is reluctant. Israel is hesitant. Will you annex? You won't annex. Will you go against the Palestinian Authority or you won't go? Are you going to punish the Palestinian people or you won't punish them? There has to be a very clear strategy. Are you going to implement the Hebron Emirate plan, Emirate quote unquote? Are you going to work with local clans? If you bring down the Palestinian Authority, what is the alternative? All these things need to be worked out and made public so that people can understand where they are standing. But that the Israeli government has not done so far, and that is, in my opinion, a mistake.
I think the Israeli government wanted to do Gaza first and settle that war once and for all, and it's been a much tougher go than anyone imagined that it would be. We're basically 2 years, and we're still fighting the Hamas, even though 80% of the Hamas command structure is decimated. They still hold 48 hostages dead and alive, and
it's their insurance policy.
It's their insurance policy, and we're not right now within the finish line of defeating the Hamas and either expelling them or finding a real alternative set different leadership families in order to take their place. As long as that hasn't happened yet, I think this is the way the Israeli government is thinking. Then, the former West Bank of Jordan, Judea and Samaria, as we know it, would come second. And then so that's why in the stage plan we haven't finished stage one. I think that's the
Yeah, there's no doubt that over the last 2 years, the Israeli government is busy with Gaza. I agree with you that you have to solve that problem first, but you have to start thinking about the day after, also in the West Bank, the day after the Palestinian Authority. What will happen if the Palestinian Authority collapses? Who will replace it? I don't see Israel taking or embarking on a serious plan in that regard, and that worries me because that creates a vacuum. This is where Western leaders are coming into with the recognition. They see that Israel is not annexing, Israel is hesitant, Israel is reluctant, Israel has no plan. So they say, why not? Let's recognize the Palestinian state and try to create facts on the ground. Of course, they are mistaken, but as long as Israel doesn't make any decision or any moves on the ground, others will.
Yeah, that's clear. It's clear that others will and others are. It is extraordinary to me that the Western powers don't have a better hold on history. They don't have a better hold on what the security implications of their moves are. But it does indicate one thing, Khaled, and that is that Israel has missed the perception of moralpolitik in the minds of the Western powers, and that very unfortunately, with a very sharp slide to the left in many Western countries, including, notwithstanding the current U.S. administration, large parts of the United States, and we know the UK under a very left Labour government, France with more than 10% now Muslim population in France, that these powers, I'm not talking about President Trump, he's been really a diehard friend of Israel and is holding out messaging, as Israel is messaging, that this is only a prize for Hamas. But a number of these Western European countries, specifically France and UK to begin. Belgium is held off, by the way, conditioning on returning the hostages, any kind of support. Italy has held off. Germany has held off, much to their credit. And I think that Israel has done a yeoman's job through Foreign Minister Saar in speaking, and Prime Minister Netanyahu in speaking to a lot of these heads of state, explaining to them that they are actually inflaming terror, not only in the Middle East, not only in the Palestinian Israeli arena, but against the West itself. And this is a point we haven't yet discussed today. We have discussed it in the past, that what is happening at the UN, most ironically, is to inflame jihadi terrorism against the West and even throughout the world by this decision.
Absolutely. Because if you are emboldening Hamas, you're emboldening Hamas's friends. And who are Hamas's friends? Islamic Jihad, the Muslim Brotherhood, and other Islamist terror groups in the Middle East. And we haven't even talked about the Iranian regime. So this is a prize not only for Hamas, it's a prize for global jihad. It's a prize for those who want to destroy Israel.
It's clear, and it does seem to me that moderate, I call them Western amenable Arab states. Let's face it, Mohammed bin Salman is a real forward thinker, and he has a vision for the Middle East. That a book has been written recently by our dear friend Fred Tubul and his co-author Terry, that really places MBS, reflects his 2030 vision, his vision for Neon, very much advances a notion that the Middle East could be a high-tech hub that Israel has really set the standard for. And it really requires leaders like MBS and His Excellency Mohammed bin Zayed to take a lead role and say, look, enough is enough, even though they are facing off and trying to quiet a very restive, 1,650,000,000 Muslims around the world and 375 million Arabs. It's true, but it seems to me that it really requires them to take a stand that they have not yet been able to take.
Yeah, each time I hear that these countries are acting as mediators, I ask myself, why mediators? Why can't you be on the right side? Why can't you come out against Hamas? Why can't you tell Hamas, release the hostages, end the war, or else? Why don't we hear a firm stance from Saudi Arabia, from most of the Arab countries against Hamas? Why is it always condemnation of Israel? Why is it pushing? Why are you pushing for the two-state solution instead of pushing Hamas to release the hostages, end the war, and save the lives of Palestinians in Gaza? And this stance on the part of the Arab world is very worrying. This hesitance, this reluctance to put pressure on a terrorist group that is also acting against the interests of the Arab countries. Saudi Arabia arrested most of the Hamas leaders in the kingdom in 2018. They threw them into prison. The Muslim Brotherhood is banned in Saudi Arabia.
And in Bahrain and in the UAE, right?
Exactly. So why don't we see such a firm stance? Why don't these countries stand and say, enough is enough? We are going to end the war tomorrow morning. Hamas, we are issuing you a deadline. You have an ultimatum. You have to meet it, or else we will take action against you. And there are many things that Saudi Arabia and all these countries can do to pressure Hamas. We haven't even talked about Qatar, that is harboring them, that is sheltering the leaders. Stop telling me that Qatar is a mediator. Qatar is not a mediator. Qatar is Hamas, and Hamas is Qatar. If Qatar really wanted to end the war tomorrow morning, all they have to do is just summon the Hamas leaders sitting in Doha, issue an ultimatum to them. If you don't end the war, if you don't release the hostages, we will deport you. We will hand you over to the Americans, to the Israelis. We will freeze your assets. We will confiscate.
All that would end it. It would all end immediately.
Immediately, without any doubt, then. But they're not doing it. And that worries me. And that's why we are still where we are 2 years later, and the war is still raging. They are all sitting there just waiting for Israel to do the job. And after Israel does it, then, they will interfere or they will come up with plans. But in the meantime, they're not doing it. They are sitting on the fence or acting as mediators. No, they should not be mediators. Hamas is part of Qatar. If Qatar is harboring them and providing them with shelter for so many years, then Qatar is responsible for them. You don't want to assume responsibility? Kick them out of Doha, kick them out of Qatar, and say, my role has ended. But you cannot, on the one hand, host them and provide them with security and with comfortable lives, and on the other hand, pretend that you are just acting as a mediator. It doesn't work like that.
Absolutely. Khaled, in the time we have remaining, let's talk about what Israel's options are, because Israel does have certain options now. And I would submit to you, and I really would like to get your thought on this, that if Israel were to recognize Hebron first, because, I was lucky enough to talk to some of these sheikhs, to some of these leaders, and you know them personally. And they're ready to publicly divorce themselves from the Palestinian Authority, to publicly divorce themselves from this corrupt Oslo process, as long as Israel gives them the security and the ammunition and the weapons they need for their own security forces. They have thousands and thousands of their own security people in Hebron. Hebron has been the commercial industrial center of the West Bank for a long, long time. And I, with my own ears, and I know that you've heard it for many years, they said, we're not interested in a Palestinian Authority type of state. We're interested in our economy, in our movement, in helping our children get ahead, in protecting our families from this corrupt, centralized Soviet type of structure called the Palestinian Authority. That could actually happen between now and tomorrow if Israel were serious about it, and that would put it.
As I mentioned, then the people are there. The sheikhs from the Emirate plan of Hebron are there. They want to engage. They want to speak out, but they are complaining that Israel is not being very clear with us. Israel is not helping us, and that's why, as I said earlier, the decision is in Israel's hands. There needs to be a policy towards these people. There is widespread discontent with the Palestinian Authority. Most Palestinians are not talking about a Palestinian state. They're talking about working. They're talking about moving around. They're talking about improving the economy, improving the living conditions. They're talking about reopening the the Alimbi Bridge. These are the things that worry Palestinians, but no one is sitting there and saying, "Oh, I want a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital, 242 and 338." You don't hear. I mean, you only hear it from senior Palestinian officials in interviews with CNN and BBC. But on the ground, what people want is, to see real changes on the ground. They want a better economy. They want permits to come and work inside Israel, and this is a time for Israel to seize the opportunity and engage these people. So that it should be Israel's responsibility, and we don't see Israel doing anything in the meantime. The Israeli government has to meet the Israeli cabinet and decide, what do you do with all these people who have come out against the Palestinian Authority, who see the Palestinian Authority as an obstacle. On the other hand, then, you cannot have people speak out against the Palestinian Authority when the Palestinian Authority has more than 60,000 or 70,000 security officers in the West Bank. They are cracking down on political activists. They are cracking down on political opponents. They are arresting journalists. They are arresting businessmen. And people are afraid to speak out. So as long as you have the Palestinian Authority and the Oslo Accords, that is an obstacle to engaging with moderate, pragmatic Palestinians who want to improve their living conditions.
Ironically, picking up on what you've just said here, Khaled, wise as you are all the time and eloquent, is that Great Britain back in the beginning of the 20th century, they backed the Balfour Declaration of Lord Balfour that recognized the historic rights of the Jewish people in its ancient homeland in what was then British Mandate Palestine, which had picked up as a result of the First World War and the defeat of the Axis powers, and certainly the Ottoman Empire, and here you have it in 2025. The United Kingdom is actually killing the very peace that it demands in the name of supporting a non-existent Palestine and a corrupt PA that nobody wants. The Israeli public doesn't want it. The Palestinian people don't want it. And here come, the United Kingdom and their friends with the best of intentions, you can argue, but they're killing the very peaceful, secure, stable outcome that they themselves demand.
As I mentioned, it's counterproductive. It's selling illusions to the Palestinians and to the rest of the world that, through declarations at the UN, you can achieve a state. If I were these in their place, in the place of the French president and the British prime minister and the Australian prime minister, I would have told the Palestinians, listen, we support your right to self-determination, but there's only one way to achieve statehood. It's by negotiating with Israel.
According to Oslo. Oslo says direct negotiation.
Absolutely. Direct negotiations with Israel. These countries can give you a piece of paper. Israel is the only country that can help you achieve a state if you are really interested in a state, because you have to sit with Israel and talk about borders. You have to talk about checkpoints. You have to talk about hilltops. You have to talk about electricity. You have to talk about water. You have to talk about security. You have to talk about... There are so many issues that need to be negotiated. And that's what these Western leaders just did. They have sent a message to the Palestinians: do not go back to the negotiating table with Israel, because we have already given you a state, and that's it. And they have actually derailed the peace process. They have actually prevented any future peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians.
Yeah, absolutely, Khaled. And as we sort of sum up, it seems that Israel has really got to move from what they know as hasbara, or explaining. They've got to move from defending and explaining to attacking and exposing. And that is a fundamental shift in the psychological, rhetorical structure of strategy of what Israel must pursue now. And that means, at a minimum, there are 650 million non-Jewish Zionists, vast majority of them Christian Zionists, around the world on 7 continents. There are Druze, there are Israeli Arabs who are deeply Zionistic in the sense that they have a sense of shared mission, shared home, the way you and I share this home. And they're equally as patriotic and equally as rejecting of this Hamas PLO type of resistance and violent revolutionary impulse that is bamboozled the whole West. So Israel has got to take the narrative back and
The initiative.
the initiative.
You need to launch an initiative of your own. You need to lead, and we don't see Israel doing that so far.
We've got to lead and not be led. And that, as it says in in Rosh Hashanah, on the first night of the Jewish New Year, we have all of these symbols at the table. These that we make these blessings, and it says that you should lead with the head and not with the tail. And this is exactly what you're suggesting. Lead with your head and don't be dragged by the tails of your enemies. Well, Khaled, it's wonderful, wonderful to have this really deep and important conversation. Israel is in quite a pickle right now, but if history is always a guide, and God willing, we'll get out of this.
I'd like to wish you and all our viewers Shana Tova, and let's hope that next year we will be in a much better situation.
Shana Tova to you, to your family, to all of Am Yisrael, and all of this wonderful multicultural country. We should have a year, God willing, this should be a year of security, stability, peace, and prosperity for all of us.
Thank you.
God willing. Thanks, Khaled.